It's easy to think about how on top of the world Zelda has felt in the Switch era, but it didn't come into the console generation that way. It would be an exaggeration to say Zelda came into this generation in a bad place, but there was definitely a sense that the tried and tested Ocarina of Time formula that Nintendo has been iterating on for nearly 2 decades was beginning to show signs of tiring. Skyward Sword reviewed very well, but people soured on it over time. A Link Between Worlds was an incredible game that began to introduce some player freedom, but it was still firmly built on the foundation of A Link to the Past. After Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, all built on the design core of Ocarina, it was time for something truly new and fresh from Zelda, and boy did it deliver that on Switch. There was a lot of pressure on Breath of the Wild. It's always important for a big launch game to hit, but Nintendo badly needed a win after the flop of the Wii U. Nintendo had rebounded from poor selling console generations before, but back-to-back misfires in a competitive market where Nintendo's handheld pillar was also being sunsetted would have been tough to overcome. Not to mention, because of how early Nintendo pulled the plug on the Wii U, Breath of the Wild was all Nintendo had to talk about for a good year in the lead up to the Switch's launch. Famously, Nintendo devoted basically the entirety of E3 2016 to the game, so Breath of the Wild needed to deliver on reinventing a 20-year-old Zelda formula, deliver on years of breathless hype and anticipation, and also anchor the launch of a console Nintendo desperately needed to be a success. It somehow did all that, and then some. Breath of the Wild is a towering achievement of game design. By 2017, not only had the Zelda formula begun to show its age, but it was also in the beginning of the era where large open-world games began to feel stale. The Ubisoft formula was just tipping past its peak, and the endless icons on the map felt more like a series of checklist chores than it did an exciting opportunity. In that regard, Breath of the Wild couldn't have dropped at a better time. It unleashes you upon a large open world with only small threads of direction, and encourages your imagination to run wild. Instead of icons and an overbearing map directing you where to go, Breath of the Wild organically guides you from place to place by constantly dropping interesting things that grab your attention. This creates a player-led open world as you constantly make choices about where to go and then get distracted by 5 other things along the way. It's much more satisfying to discover the world and what it contains that way, rather than simply walking to an icon on the map. The game also offers a toolset that encourages a similar level of exploration. Weapons break, so that you're constantly incentivized to find something new or experiment with something you haven't used before, either out of curiosity or panicked necessity. All of the Sheikah Slate abilities offer fun and novel ways to interact with the world, with the puzzles and shrines built to allow you to solve them in multiple ways. The physics of the world encourage approaching problems and encounters playfully, using fire or wind or momentum to your advantage in a way that seems to do everything it can to say yes to your wackiest ideas. But most of all, Breath of the Wild has atmosphere. The world looks beautiful and striking, with a soundtrack that I think veers into underrated both for its understated field pieces, calming town themes, and more bombastic tracks for boss encounters and big story beats. But most of all, there's just an intangible magic to the world. It's so easy to get lost in, so easy to just keep wandering, to keep finding more, to allow yourself one more distraction. There is a beautiful solitude to that world, even with its towns and people. In a way, greater than the sum of its already considerable parts. The whole experience coalesces into something that can be simultaneously exciting, inspiring, haunting, intimidating. It's just Link against the whole world, and sometimes all you've got on your side is a stick. The sense of adventure, combined with that intangible vibe, made Breath of the Wild utterly captivating. Oh, sorry. Not sure how this got in here. Cadence of Hyrule felt like the beginning of something wonderful. The idea of indie developers getting to put their own spin on top-tier Nintendo franchises felt like something we'd never see, and felt like it opened a tantalizing box. Your imagination couldn't help but run wild pairing Nintendo IP with cool indie developers, getting a new spin or a wholly different take on some of Nintendo's games. In the end, that sadly didn't happen. Cadence of Hyrule stood alone as its own beast, with Nintendo remaining the true gatekeepers of their IP. But what a cool thing Cadence of Hyrule was. There are many much lamer ways this could have gone, from some character skins to just a music pack. Instead, we got a fully realized reimagining of Crypt of the Necrodancer's formula in the spirit of Zelda, with places and weapons and enemies on top of the characters and music. It was a delight. A really difficult delight. Apologies for the truly diabolically bad gameplay b-roll here. Zelda games are generally tough to parachute back into, but this reminded me just how much it kicked my ass the first time when I dropped into my completed save to grab some footage. It'd have been nice if this started a long precedent of indie Nintendo games, but as a standalone, it was a delight. I have a tricky relationship with 2D Zelda games. I love the overworld map. I love wandering around, solving little puzzles, finding new places and people, discovering little secrets, using all of my new items and abilities in new and neat ways. I could just endlessly wander those Zelda overworlds full of character and personality and mystery. And then I don't really care for dungeons. The find a key to unlock a door formula, particularly older Zelda dungeons, always tires me out faster than the game introduces new items and puzzle mechanics. I struggle with all those same feelings with Link's Awakening. The overworld is bright and vibrant and exciting to explore. The game is bursting at the seams with charm and character and that signature Zelda weirdness. And then I have to tolerate the dungeons. I'm in the camp that likes how it looks. I like that it gives 2D Zelda its own unique toy box visual style, and we'll be fine if this is how 2D Zelda looks for at least the next little while. Performance hiccups aside that hopefully the Switch 2 will finally fix. This was a lovely little remake, and hopefully they continue through the 2D catalog with them. I really want a Link Between Worlds. I first got Skyward Sword in like 2014 while I was trying to make my way through all the 3D Zeldas. I played it for like 8 hours, liked it well enough, but found the motion controls of it all just annoying enough that I dropped it and never picked it back up. Until like 3 years later, where, determined, I was going to try again. I started from the start again because I knew I'd have lost all the motion control muscle memory. Played for like 8 hours, liked it well enough, but still found the motion controls just annoying enough that I dropped it. Then the Switch remake came around. It looked nice, bringing the pretty watercolor painterly quality into HD. It remapped some of the motion control wonkiness to the controller. Would this be the time? Would this finally be the moment that Skyward Sword is no longer the only 3D Zelda game I haven't finished? No. I played it for like 2 hours this time, liked it well enough, and never went back to it. Maybe it's just destined to never happen. But when I was grabbing footage for this, part of my brain was like, Garrett, what if you tried just one more time? Nintendo set themselves an impossible task with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Not only did they have to follow up one of the most critically acclaimed games ever made, a game that tops many best game of all time lists, but they had to do it in a direct sequel set in the same world. It would be one thing if they decided to do something radically different to try and avoid a point of direct comparison, but they were like, no, we're using the same tools, in the same world, with the same town, and the same characters, and a bunch of the same core ideas. And then they did. Yes, they were standing on the shoulders of a giant, but they dropped another giant right on top of it. The core systems of Tears of the Kingdom feel impossible. They should not be real, and if they are real, they shouldn't work nearly as well as they do, especially so on Switch. Part of what makes me so frustrated with the power of modern machines being applied more to the continued visual fidelity arms race than novel mechanics, is seeing what these developers pulled off on what is ostensibly marginally better than PlayStation 3 hardware. Physics and the ability to make contraptions existed more at the edge of Breath of the Wild, in more controlled ways. It was more an exploitation of the core mechanics by some very creative players than a feature of them. But Nintendo seemed to see that and say, what if the whole game was that? That takes the yes and mentality of Breath of the Wild and blows it wide open, allowing your creativity to be the only barrier between you and solving any problem in front of you. That takes an astounding amount of confidence as developers, to create a series of challenges and say, there's probably a main way to do this, but feel free to ultra hand together any silly, bizarre contraption to get the job done. I worried about two things coming into Tears of the Kingdom. I loved the shrines in Breath of the Wild. They were beautiful little puzzle boxes that extracted everything I liked about Zelda puzzle design, with a lot less wandering around looking for a key to the door that you missed. But I feared that dropping a similar number of them into Tears of the Kingdom would end up feeling like a retread of the same thing. Thankfully, that ended up not being the case because of just how much fun Ultra Hand ended up being in allowing you to problem solve each shrine differently. I also worried about a repeat of the same map. I spent north of 135 hours with Breath of the Wild. I'd explored that world pretty thoroughly. I thought that maybe there wouldn't be the same sense of wonder in the discovery and exploration. Thankfully, the Sky Islands and Depths added new areas to explore, and the game did a great job of evolving the map to make seeing the changes over time from the original game a joy in itself. The game also loved putting small little treats and secrets in the locations of things in Breath of the Wild, so experience with the original game became a reward all its own. If the magical adventurous tone and atmosphere defined Breath of the Wild, a Looney Tunes spirit of comedic timing defined Tears of the Kingdom. It's basically a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote simulator, where you build a silly, elaborate contraption to complete a simple task, and it somehow backfires spectacularly in a way you could never have expected. The joy in the chaos of that experimentation as the game tries to make whatever nonsense you built work is borderline endless. Nintendo have a fun challenge in front of them. What does 3D Zelda look like next? Breath of the Wild pushed the mood of a Zelda game in an all-new direction. Tears of the Kingdom brought insane mechanical invention. Where do you go from here? I have no idea. But I thought you couldn't successfully follow up Breath of the Wild and live up to the hype, and they did that. So I'm very excited to see what they do next. Did you know the thing Wolf Link is howling mournfully about in the Twilight Princess HD title screen is not being ported to Switch? I think people see Echoes of Wisdom in the wrong way. Because it came right in the wake of the mechanical insanity of Tears of the Kingdom, people assumed it was applying that same total open-ended freedom to the 2D Zelda formula. And to a degree it was. The copying system in Echoes of Wisdom definitely applied more of that same creative, open-ended problem solving. But on the whole, the game skews a lot closer to a standard 2D Zelda experience with some new ideas than a total reinvention of it. It owes a lot more to Link to the Past and Link's Awakening and Minish Cap and Link Between Worlds than it does Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Going into it with those expectations, you'll have a very good time. I think if you go into it expecting something wildly revolutionary, it'll fall a little flat. Most of my same 2D Zelda thoughts apply here. I love overworld exploration, and I tolerate dungeons. And you play as Zelda. That's pretty important to mention. You no longer walk around swinging a sword and getting new items and weapons. You copy things in the world and use them for your bidding. I like this approach to playing as Zelda. If the game was just a copy and paste 2D Zelda game but with Zelda pasted in as the main character instead of Link, it'd feel like an empty gesture. It felt like they were thoughtful in how they adapted the 2D formula for Zelda being the main character, leaning on the idea of her wisdom, while also just giving you a button you can hit sometimes if you really want to just slash your way out of everything. It has some of the same performance woes as Link's Awakening, and it has an exasperated version of a problem that arose in Tears of the Kingdom. There's gotta be a better system for managing large inventories than scrolling and sorting a seemingly endless row of items, but while Echoes of Wisdom won't blow your socks off, it's a very good time. The rest of the Zelda entries on Switch could have been dog shit, and I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom would earn Zelda on Switch the highest marks regardless. Thankfully, we got a couple of good to great remasters, a delightful indie spin-off, and a lovely new 2D entry. And then there's those two towering behemoths. Two brilliant pillars of game design, reinventing what it means to be a 3D Zelda game. When people think about Switch, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the first thing that's going to come to mind for years and years to come. They show that despite hardware limitations, despite changing trends and market conditions, Nintendo and Zelda still have that magic to do something it feels like nobody else could. We spent the entire console generation waiting for games that were inspired by Breath of the Wild's exploration and freedom. They never came. Most games just stuck a hand glider in there and called it a day. The same is going to be the case of Tears of the Kingdom. That speaks to just what Nintendo achieved with Zelda on Switch. Zelda on Switch gets an S. That's it for Zelda. Pretty good console generation. Have to say, thumbs up. Well done to the folks at Nintendo. You really did it with that one. If you enjoyed this video, there's a link to a Patreon in the description and in the comments. Any support would be greatly appreciated. I've already done videos on Mario and Pokemon. You can go watch them. We'll also be doing some more videos down the line, so check those out, and thanks for watching.